Welcome to the Two Act Podcast, a weekly discussion on anime, cinema, and TV, where we break down stories that don't just entertain, they linger, they unsettle, they challenge. And today we're diving into A Different Man, the latest work from Aaron Schimberg, an A24 film that released earlier in the year, which I feel has sort of been lost in all the new films that have come out from their slate. If you're unfamiliar with Aaron Schimberg, uh, he's the director behind a cult gem called Chain for Life. And I gotta admit, I've not seen this film, but um, Schimberg is known for stories about characters with disfigurement. Um, it's a it's a theme that's really close to his own personal life because he himself has a facial difference. He suffers from a cleft palate. And in The Different Man, to give you a synopsis, is a story about Edward, played by Sebastian Stan, who suffers from neurofibromatosis, a condition that results in non-cancerous tumors growing in the nerves. And in this film, it's like you've never seen him before. He's a man chasing reinvention. He's struggling with this condition that makes him look uh, troubled, and it leads him to, undergo a dramatic facial reconstructive surgery. He starts fixating on an actor portraying his own life in a local play that he's part of. And, the film just takes you down this rabbit hole of identity, obsession, and how stories we tell about ourselves can become, well, distorted. Schimberg brings a deeply personal touch to the story. His perspective on facial difference makes this film not just a psychological thriller, but a layered, uncomfortable reflection on visibility and how we define humanity, with humor and dark humor and, unsettling psychosis and the atmosphere. Think Kafka meets Lynch, but grounded in the painfully mundane. Edward is a aspiring actor who radically transforms his appearance. And however, that new dream he receives in his new face quickly turns into a nightmare as he becomes obsessed with reclaiming what he lost. So we'll go with opening thoughts. John, what did you think of A Different Man?
Ah, first impression. I loved this movie up to like the 40-minute mark. I could not give two shits about Guy Morass. Spoilers for A Different Man.
Yeah, it's distinctively different. It's one of those films that makes a huge turn in the middle, and you can view it in two parts. Because the first part of the film, I think the first 1 hour is a real character building depiction on Edward. He's this guy, like I said, suffers from this facial disfigurement, and it leads him to a life that is really troubled, filled with anxiety, paranoia, and that sort of affects him in every corner. And then, of course, once he changes his face through this miraculous, radical drug trial surgery, he becomes Guy Moratz, who's his handsome Sebastian Stan, basically. He's got a really celebrity like face and appearance. And
yeah, speaking of celebrity, I did notice, I was like, what do I know this guy from? And I was like, oh yeah, he's from Marvel movies.
Of course, he's from Marvel
that's
movies.
the Winter Soldier. I didn't know the Winter Soldier could act this good.
Fans, that's the thing. I mean, he is a revelation in this. I do think it's one of his best performance of all time that he's ever given.
Yeah,
I think
for sure.
I think he's such an underrated actor. He's been sort of lost in the Marvel machine playing
Right.
Bucky Barnes. But it's so we can talk about him, and then we'll obviously address your concerns with the second part of the film. But yeah, no, he's a great actor. I mean, he's having a bit of a breakout year this year because not only did he win the Best Actor award for A Different Man in the Berlin Film Festival, where I believe it premiered earlier in the year, but he also stars in another film called The Apprentice, which is about Donald Trump.
Oh yeah, you
And
showed me a clip from that, and I cringed so fucking hard.
yeah, well, it's a really controversial film, but I do think I don't personally like the film. I'm not, I don't think it does anything great, but I definitely admired his performance because I just think he plays a character who's so easily parodied, and it's so hard to play that man. But he does it in such a way that I think it's the closest I've seen anyone play this character, this person, and not sort of get on the end of being farcical or frivolous. So, it's a really good performance, and I think what's happened with this film is, you got two different films come out, and this one's kind of taken a back seat in that regard, and that's why I want to criticize A24, and I don't really criticize them a lot because I love A24. I think they're fucking shit. They're the best studio working today. Independent cinema is thriving because of them, and I just think, like, they've got like 20 films out this year, and I just don't think that they've been able to market this film really well. It just feels like it's been shoved in the back for like some of the other films that they're banking on for award season. But that's a shame because, it's crazy. They got three films coming out next month itself. So I can only imagine the resources must be so scarce. But I'm really glad this film exists. I think it's a really underrated film in a way because it deals with a subject matter of disfigurement, which I want to say that normally films on such topics that deal with disability can often easily fall for the trapping of being, you know,
Too
uh,
preachy.
too preachy or being too miserable, too didactic, just being a really
Yeah.
bleak portrayal about disability. And I think it's
Right.
it's refreshing to see a story that, not only deals with such a sensitive subject matter head on, but also does it in a way that makes it palatable. There's a lot of humor in this film that I didn't expect. I was laughing at certain points with how, you know, layered it was with dark humor. And there were times where it was completely unsettling and surreal, and it created paranoia and anxiety. But I think it's great that this film exists. I mean, it's only made 1 million. A lot of people don't know about this film, and I think that's why it makes it even more interesting to talk about.
Mm.
Let's go into your main issue with the film. So you said you couldn't give a shit about Guy Moratz.
Not at all.
What was your
um
main gripe about
well,
that?
my main gripe about that is, so we get the first half of the movie is like it's suffering porn, and I liked stuff like that because it gives you a good like look beyond like what it's like to live like this. And you got people treating him like shit. They got, people's side comments to his face where they're like, oh, like they got jump scared. And then you got like the infomercial he was making that was hella awkward.
Yeah,
And
it starts with that. By the way, it starts with this
yeah,
scene
I'm
where he's, meant to
he's
be
an actor.
suffering, and he's poorly. Let me just like make it really clear before like you continue. That is not good direction. You don't go to an actor and literally direct them that way. But
Right.
it did make me chuckle because a lot of
Yeah.
these training videos and infomercials are kind of shot sort of half-ass way. But
Right. Well,
I
it's because
just
the
found it really
director don't give a shit. Yeah, yeah. So when I'm watching this infomercial, I'm thinking to myself, Adi, what the fuck did you just make me watch? Because we just got off the substance, and that movie is insane.
It is, yeah. So the substance, like since we spoke about it, has received so much uh, attention in pop culture, and it's ironic because I remember when we spoke about The Substance, we were like, I feel like this film hasn't really hit the buzz that it deserves, but
Right.
now it's quite a strong possibility that it could even end up being a major award season contender. I mean, it's picking up, it's marinated a bit with the mainstream, and I feel like critics have really warmed up to it.
Hmm.
But I couldn't help but also see the comparison with The Substance with A Different Man. I
Yep.
think what I prefer about A Different Man, I think its screenplay is a lot more nuanced and layered than The
Hmm.
Substance. The Substance just hamming it in, dialing
Oh
it
yeah.
up to
No, it's
100. It's an experience film.
yep.
This is completely different. It's a lot more on character development. It's a lot more on getting into Edward's fractured psyche. The fact that it's his appearance that makes him feel that he's not worthy of existing, but then he's miraculously given this opportunity to be a new man, a reinvention. You know, the gift of being able to reinvent your life. Who wouldn't take that opportunity? I
Yep.
think a lot of people would, because a lot of people aren't happy with themselves in some way, and I just think
Hmm.
that's really fallible and human. But the fact that he gets this opportunity and a new face and realizes he's just as miserable. And what's funny is he encounters another actor played by Adam Pearson, who's amazing in this. And Adam Pearson, who plays Oswald, takes over his role. And that's when he starts to feel envy for this guy because he
Right.
suffers from the exact same condition he did. But except, unlike Edward, Oswald is, he's just this really gregarious character who's comfortable in his own skin. He's
Hmm.
kind of happy with who he is. He's a guy whose disfigurement is the least interesting thing about him. And
Hmm.
that just speaks volumes about Edward as a character, or a guy as a character,
Right.
because he can't help but feel envy and misery, the sense of not feeling enough, which I thought was
It's
ironic.
then you have that guy that hangs himself, and the first door that they check is Edward's.
Yeah, there's a lot of like moments of like, so this is what I really enjoyed about the first 1 hour of the film. Apart from just showing you how difficult his life is with his environment, and I think a lot of that is directly translated experiences of the director himself. I was I was watching an interview where Aaron Schimberg spoke about how he has a cleft palate himself, and when he's walking in public, he's often been really conscious, or felt insecure about people staring at him. And I think a lot of people who struggle from disabilities would feel that way as well. So I really liked how he was able to convey that. And of course, Edward's face is an extreme example. I mean,
Right.
the prosthetic work in this film is amazing. I got to
Hmm.
shout out to the prosthetic artist, Mike Moreno, who also did the prosthetics for the Penguin, which just ended. He's, I think, one of the best prosthetic artists working today in Hollywood. And it's actually Sebastian Stan wearing prosthetics for
Yeah.
the first one
For a
hour. And
second
it's so
there,
believable.
I thought it was that other actor.
Yeah, no, I did
That's
as
how good
well.
it
And
looks.
then
Yeah, I was like,
it was
is that
amazing.
Adam Pearson?
It was amazing. It was
Yeah.
it was so intricate. It was so
And then like his like
detailed.
slouched back too, like in
That
that.
is so
Like,
great that you brought that up, because
yeah.
that demeanor, that slouched demeanor,
Yeah.
completely takes over his life. That's him.
Hmm.
It sums up who he is. He's this guy who's kind of given up on himself. He's an aspiring actor. He lives in a shitty New York apartment.
He'll never
You
whistle.
don't, yeah, you don't know what he really does. But what I coming back to the point that I was getting to, what I liked was I love the way it creates this sense of anxiety. It's
Mm.
moments like like you said, the screeching of the subway when he's walking under the bridge. There's, you know, moments like ceiling falling on his face, the rat
Mhm.
falling down, him
Yeah.
cutting himself,
Mhm.
people looking at him and like just being disgusted or being, finding him to be hideous. And it really captures that sense of paranoia and anxiety that he feels in
It made
in
me
his
really
life.
hate New York.
Yeah, I mean, it's something incredible the way he's managed to capture New York in a way. It feels like New York from the 70s, and
Yep.
I love
Fucking
that
hate it.
that they shot it in film. I think the textures, the fact that they shot it in film really gives it a unique aesthetic compared to
Mhm.
if it was just digital, because you really can see the grimy, the seedy nature of where he lives and the characters around him, and you know everything everything is sort of like a routine that's filled with misery. And I think there's a moment in the film where he's coming back to his apartment and then he meets his neighbor and he meets another guy, and this guy quotes Lady Gaga, and he tells him all happiness in life comes from not accepting what is. And it's really good advice because Edward can't accept that. He can't accept who he is or what his condition is and how it affects his life. And I think a lot of it has to do with just having a positive attitude that he lacks. I'll give you a really interesting example that I found in one of the opening scenes. So, do you remember that scene in the subway in the beginning of the film?
Okay. Yeah,
Uh,
I
so,
do.
so there's this scene where like uh, he's in the subway and there's this crazy homeless character who's
Yep.
going through the train, the carriage, and there's this casting director who specializes in unique physiognomies, and he approaches this character, this homeless guy, instead of Edward, and he tells him he makes for an interesting character and he could have potential to be in a show or whatever. And it's ironic because Edward is an aspiring actor, but he doesn't make that connection. He feels ashamed. He chooses to be, hidden. He doesn't want to make that connection. And it's ironic because Oswald, in comparison, the juxtaposition, Oswald is so confident in himself that he does make that connection. And I don't know if you noticed, but the very first scene where Adam Pearson appears on screen, his character Oswald makes a remark saying that he got to know about this play through a casting director who specializes in unique physiognomies, and it's the same casting director you see in the train in the opening of the film.
Mhm.
So that shows like this guy, sure, he has his condition, but he lets it define who he is when it doesn't necessarily need to be the case, because you've got another character who fully embraces it. He's so much more than that. And I think the juxtaposition of them I really enjoyed. I do admit that I wish Adam Pearson's character appeared a bit more in the film. I feel like he comes
Mhm.
in a bit later on, but it's just this idea that it doesn't really matter what you look like, but it matters how you think. Because a positive, confident attitude can attract opportunities. And
Mhm.
Edward's inferior, nervous attitude hinders his ability to make the most of his circumstances, I feel. Um, it's just really ironic and it's cruel in a way because yeah, it gets to a point where he gets what he wants, but it's not enough. I guess we should
Yeah,
talk about Renata Ranswe, who plays or Renswa, sorry, who plays Ingrid. Is another character he bumps across
I
in the
really wish
first.
she didn't drop her accent. I really liked her accent. When he first meets her, she's like, "Ooh, exotic." I'm like, "I'm into this." I'm like, "Yeah." He falls hard as hell after her, like
He
because
does.
she shows him just a modicum of like friendship, like just like
Yeah.
it. Like I feel for him because I know it's not gonna go well because just his general demeanor, and it's just like, oh, this is just gonna be suffering porn, and I love suffering porn. Don't get me wrong. And then he like sees like different guys coming out of her apartment. I'm just like, oh man.
Yeah, I really felt the sigh he felt when so there's a scene where she first like looks at him and she's like, "Oh my god," like she gasps because of course his face is, it's not normal.
Yep.
And then she warms up to him in a way that she's being friendly, you're right. But
Yep.
I guess he interprets it as something else maybe. But
Yeah.
it doesn't really get as detailed as until she enters his apartment,
Yep.
and she sort of tends to his wound because it shocks him and he cuts his
Yep.
finger.
Yep.
That was pretty gory,
And then
but turns out she was just looking for detergent.
and then she goes to like pop his blackhead, and I'm squirming. I'm squirming. I'm like, I hate this. I want off this ride. It's just reminding me of just, like first dates or anything like that, where you just get
Yeah,
like so, oh, oh, I'm like, just, I want to leave my body.
yeah, yeah, I get that. It's such an awkward encounter because it's the first time anyone's like touched his face or
Right.
attempted to touch his face,
She's
and it
breaking
creates
a
this.
blackhead. Fucking gross.
Yeah, it's this moment of intimacy that really creates a bit of tension between the two. But I guess she feels deeply awkward about it as well. And yeah, I just think that she's a really contradictory character for me
Mm,
because I think she's like sarcastic. She's kind of mixed in
right.
her emotions. Um, I think it's fairly clearly established that she tends to move on a lot from different guys. Like,
Right.
she gets in with, she's attracted to one person and then she moves on to the next when she's no longer infatuated with them or whatever. But with Edward, it starts off like a hint of a friendship, and as Guy, it moves on to romance. But we'll talk about that in a bit. But what's interesting is like I loved how like I don't know if this is intentional or it's just like dry Scandinavian humor, but she just comes off like as cruel at times. And there are like three moments in the film that I want to point out that were so cruel, but were so funny and fucked up in a way. The first was like when he gives her the typewriter
Yep.
and he's like, like, yeah, I found it on the road, and like, you're a writer, you're a playwright, write me a part here, take this, it's a housewarming gift. And then later when he comes back as Guy and he asks her, oh, where did you get this typewriter from? And she's like, oh, don't know, looks Italian.
You can have
So
it.
she's not like mentioning that it was a gift from Edward. And there's a scene where oh my god, this was like the moment where I was squirming the most. But there's a sex scene between Guy and
Put on the
Ingrid, and
mask.
she asks him to put on the mask, the prosthetic mask that he has of his previous face.
Oh, yeah, it was
And
gross.
and then she's giggling, and
Yeah,
then she's like, "You look ridiculous. This is a fucking joke."
that was very cruel.
And
And the funny
that
thing is,
was
that's when Guy was the most comfortable while he's wearing the mask
Yeah, yeah, that
because
was
that's his old
he was
self.
because it's like, oh, like you liked me. It's kind of like validating who he was
Right.
before he became Guy, but then turns out she finds it ridiculous. And then at the end of the film, she's like, when they're like in the ending scene, they're like talking about reflecting on their play, and then she's like, "Oh, that play is an embarrassment. It's a piece of shit.
It's a
I don't
piece of
even let
shit.
I don't even let people perform that anymore."
There, yeah.
And even the movie that they tried to make on him with Michael Shannon, turns out that never happened as well. So even
Yep.
his life is not worth of a movie being made on. It's just fucking cruel, man. I mean,
Mhm.
so I don't know. I think she's like it's a great performance by Renata
Yeah.
Reinswa.
I just don't think it's as good as Sebastian Shawn or Pearson at all.
No, no, it's a supporting role, but I think
Yep.
the film really takes a different step when Adam Pearson appears,
Yep.
uh, and that's when you get to see uh this sort of conflict turn up, and I feel like the point where he okay, so he gets the surgery, and he makes a bold choice, and he says Edward's dead, and nobody recognizes him.
Yep.
Uh,
The
I love
doctor
the
he was
whole.
working with, where he comes in and asks about him, and he's like, "Oh no, he died.
Yeah,
Was he depressed? Oh, well, we cremated him."
yeah, it's
Saying he was family
Ted
member of Edward.
cousin or something.
Yeah.
And but I love the whole transformation. I thought the bit where he goes to the bar and he's getting drunk and he has his first sexual encounter with that girl.
Yep.
All of that was great. It was just like a different, completely different experience for him. Something that
Mhm.
he would never be able to experience uh, with his facial disfigurement.
Well, he
But
could
then he
have. He just had to be
chooses.
like Pearson.
Yeah, well, he should have had a different attitude, maybe. But
Mhm.
knowing him, knowing the character that's been established, you just know he's not gonna change, right?
No.
He can change on the surface, which he does, but it's not good enough unless you really change from within, and that's like the most difficult thing to do, right? Like that's like the hardest step to take. Can you
Mhm.
really change yourself from within? So that's, I think, the root of Edward's issue.
Yep.
But it's a bold choice to like reinvent yourself and be like, no, I'm gonna discard this guy. I'm gonna be Guy Moratz, a successful real estate agent,
Yep.
and he's pretty successful. He has a great apartment then, and there's like that's the moment where the film takes a time jump. So it cuts to black, and it takes a jump in time. We don't know, just
I
a few
was
months or a year.
so confused when that happened. I was like, did the drug have side effects where he loses lapse of his time? Like I'm trying to like piece this
No,
in the
it's
movie.
not the substance in that regard where
Yeah, I'm just like,
the
what's going
drug.
on?
So I was expecting that as well. I was thinking, oh, maybe there's gonna be side effects, or maybe
Yeah.
he's gonna go back to
Nope.
the doctor, or some shit
Nothing.
happens. But no, it turns out it was just a successful, you know, successful trial that worked, and that's that really.
Or he got the placebo. he
He
was
talks about it, doesn't he?
he was while he was under, he was like, "Oh no, I'm getting the placebo. You guys aren't doing shit for me."
But I guess like he's successful, but he's not satisfied until like he bumps into he notices Ingrid in the street again and then
Yep.
follows her. Turns out she's actually writing a play on Edward, his previous self. And I don't know, that has a profound effect on him, and he feels like he was born to play this role. And he shows up, and he's a pretty bad actor as Guy. He's not the greatest, but because he's playing himself, he can convey a sense of authenticity about Edward, and that
Not until he
convinces.
takes a second attempt at with the mask on.
Yeah, well, when
She
he
doesn't like
takes.
his first attempt at all.
No, no, but I mean, the first attempt is kind of like a out of nowhere fluke.
All right.
I think he gets mis
But
mismatched for another applicant, but
yep.
when he puts on the mask, he just becomes Edward again,
Nobody cared who I was until I put on the mask.
and that's what the film's about. It's all about masking and unmasking, and
Mm-hmm.
if you look at the subtext of the film, it's about a man who's wearing a prosthetic playing himself, who then later gets replaced by someone who isn't.
Right. Yeah.
And
I really feel like this entire movie is like dancing around the fact that Edward's not dead and everyone's pretending that he is.
I don't know. I can't say for sure if everyone's pretending because they don't know for sure, right?
Well,
How
yeah,
can
yeah,
they?
yeah. I guess she assumes he's dead. I guess.
Yeah, she does. I mean, the thing is, she comes off as a really insecure character. She's
Right.
insecure even about herself as a writer. So her decision to write about Edward and write about the early confrontation she has with him in the film,
Hmm.
could be something that's manifested but is not really pure. It's not her true artistic endeavor. Maybe she's just, just like her interest in men. It's something that temporarily gets piques her interest, but we know she's gonna eventually move on to it. But I guess when she meets Guy and she sees him perform with that mask, she's convinced like that's her creation coming to life. She's entirely sure about that. But then you slowly see that he's losing track of who he is as Edward as well because his performance kind of gets shittier as it goes along until Oswald appears in the film, and that's where she is so interested in Oswald, even though that's not Edward.
Right.
That's another guy. That's another not a guy, but that's another person.
Hmm.
It's not the same person she's writing a play about, and she gets interested in Oswald. And Oswald's just this really ubiquitous character who comes in and edges Guy Edward out of everything.
Yeah.
Edges him out of his friend circle. He edges him out of his role that he was born to play. And that's where I enjoyed that whole juxtaposition the most. Because it's kind of like a lot of people would think like, this guy, he can't possibly be so nice. There's gotta be like an ulterior motive. Like, why is Oswald so perfect?
So
He's just
perky.
he's so perky, he's so perfect. He's made some lucky investments, and he
He's
ran away with his
English.
professors in Tangier, and he's English, and he's rich. And turns out he's uh looking to build a base in New York. And when he meets these guys, when he meets the play and the crew, he just fits in. He just, I don't know, he gets Ingrid's attention. You can see Guy is completely that's what I loved the most about the character. Like, not the character's traits, but like in the way that Schimberg shows his progression. It's just in a sense, Edward is robbed of his identity twice over at the same time. So
Hmm.
Edward becomes kind of an imposter confronted by something real and authentic. And there's a sense of like passing the torch from actors, you know, playing acting disabilities to disabled actors playing who they want to play. And, the audience and the protagonist are like, Oswald's maybe a bit swarmy, maybe a bit phony, but Oswald couldn't be more kinder, more empathetic. It's based on this idea of people when they see somebody who they think might be faulty in some way, they don't like to see them succeed, and it can be difficult to accept. And Edward is looking at Oswald, who's perfectly happy, seems to accept himself, and that bothers Edward. And why does it bother him is a huge part of the central conflict of the movie. I mean, you kind of think like they're gonna have a personal moment where they might like break out in a fight or argue, but Oswald couldn't be a
They
nicer
kind of
guy.
do.
Well, they kind of do
Yeah.
once Guy gets a breakdown and becomes crazy obsessed with Oswald and
Right.
starts stalking him. That's where he gets. I love the scenes where he puts on the mask and he attempts to put on a
Goes
British
into his
accent like
job and gets
Oswald.
fired
Yeah.
being
I
the
love that
leader.
scene. I
Yeah.
love that scene where he's trying to
Yeah.
make a sale to a client, and he's
Little
just
girl.
So fucking crazy. Uh, I thought I
That's
was
awesome.
watching like Heath Ledger in that scene
Right.
because he just got that posture and the movement so right. Like
Right.
physically, I love the physicality of the role.
Yep.
Like you mentioned, the slouch demeanor at the start of the film, and in the second half of the film, he's when he goes unhinged, he starts stalking him, and there's that scene at the karaoke place where everyone, I think that best represents who Oswald is. He's just a magnetic force. The minute he goes on stage, he's not afraid to go on stage, and he sings, and everyone in the bar can't help but feel enamored by Oswald's performance. And I think a lot of the camera then focuses on Sebastian Stan's face, and you can see that he's in denial. He's in sort of, he can't accept that this guy who has the same issue he did can be so okay with it, and people love him for it. And it's like what I said about the conflict. I think that is such a central theme of the tension that happens in this film, and it's cruel in a way because it shouldn't be the case. He's got this second chance to be a different man, but he doesn't take that opportunity.
I feel like this whole movie could have been derailed if he just went to therapy.
What do you think would have happened?
Oh, it would have got really boring. It would, yeah. We probably would
Um,
stop watching.
I think that's why I enjoy how surreal and psychologically unsettling the film can be, because it's not like he gets admitted and follows reality and
Right.
gets into an institution or whatever, but yeah, he's still living another life. He's able to hack his way to a different identity without being spotted. Uh, and I think the funny bit is when he gets so unhinged, he attacks Oswald, and he's like,
Yep.
You steal my life, you steal my play," and he tries to like take your mask off, and he tries to like wrestle him, and
Hmm.
and Oswald ends up like fucking throwing him over the couch, and then the whole set collapses on him. And Oswald's like, "Oh, my strength! I didn't know I was so strong." I found that bit really funny.
Yeah, in an earlier bit, he did say he did jujitsu.
True, true. You're right.
Callback.
Yeah, he said he could juggle, he could do jujitsu,
Can
he
do it
could do a
all.
lot of different acts, and he can
It's like
act as well.
cripples guy. He's a quadriplegic for a temporary amount of time. He's got full body
That
cast.
bit where I thought that was weird. So the
Yeah.
film takes a bit of a left turn where they still, despite what happens with the play, they
Right.
still remain friends and they're still caring for him. They're still like living together, or they end up living together. I don't
Oh
know.
yeah, that
And
was
it's almost like
probably
this act of cuckolding because he's like he's just he's just in a cast. And I think that scene where Michael Shannon makes an appearance and they're talking about
the
adapting this
movie.
play into a film, and they're having conversations about Edward, who's literally sat in front of you. They don't know. And he's looking at Oswald's character. Sorry, he's looking at Adam Pearson's character Oswald, and he's asking him about playing Edward. And this guy Sebastian Stan is just there. He's just watching it all. He can't do anything about it.
Right.
And it just shows how irrelevant he becomes. And I think the thing that really caught me off guard was the bit where he's with this physical trainer,
Yeah, he's doing the PT.
and he's doing the PT, and it's Christmas time, and they're heading, so Oswald, and turns out by then Oswald and Ingrid's relationship, has to become quite serious. She's expecting a child, and they're heading out for Christmas. And then the trainer who's training Guy looks at Oswald, and he's like, "Holy shit! How does that guy end up with someone like her? Like, what the fuck? And something happens there. I don't know how it is. It's almost like his past traumas or whatever it was, something clicked
Yep.
within
Set him
Guy
off.
as
Yeah.
Edward that set him off. And he ends up taking a kitchen knife and stabbing him in the shoulder.
And he
And I
like
was
can't
expecting him to
walk.
kill yeah. And I was expecting him to kill Oswald
Right.
by then. I thought he was gonna kill Oswald. I didn't expect him to kill the trainer. But
Right.
it caught me completely by surprise. And by then I was like, holy shit, like what sort of a turn this film's gonna take now? Because it just gets weirder and weirder and more unhinged. Uh but turns out it was, I think, something within him got triggered of being Edward and being looked down upon that way that caused him to, you know, it's like kick the dog a bit, and
Right.
it just goes berserk. What did you think of like the whole transition from that? Did you feel his jealousy for Oswald
No,
was valid?
I have no love for Guy. I have no love for Guy Gaunt, the drunk asshole, where he got his name from. I have no love for
Guy
Guy.
Moratz, that's
Yep.
the
Yep, I
name.
have no love for him. It, he lost sympathy the second he became a beautiful man. It's just like, oh, you're just another asshole now, you know?
True, true. A good-looking asshole.
Yeah.
But it's so ironic because the film establishes really early on that it's not all about appearances.
Right.
I mean, it is a big factor, and I'd be lying if I said appearances don't matter. Of course they matter. I think in a world where our attention span is not more than 3 milliseconds,
Mhm.
uh, we're not gonna, we're gonna judge a book by its cover pretty quickly. And I think that a person like Edward who suffers from a facial difference makes it a lot more harder to be to exist in a normalized way. But you see examples in the film that show that that is not necessarily the case. And I want to point out two examples. The first is in the first half of the film. You see the neighbor that who keeps walking past Edward and keeps saying, "Oh, Jesus Christ!" Like, he's just.
Yep,
You remember the guy, the bearded
I
guy?
do.
So there's a scene where Edward later spots this guy walking with a really attractive woman.
Mhm.
And then there's another scene after the play becomes a success once they've kicked out a guy from the role. And they're celebrating in a bar. Uh, there's a blink and you miss it cameo from Aaron Schimberg himself,
Yep.
who's with another, beautiful woman beside him, and
I'm like, there's the
they're having a
director.
drink. There's the director, but nobody would know that unless
No.
they really knew who Schimberg was
I
or
don't know who
researched.
he is, but I looked at his face and I watched the film and went, that's the guy.
That is the guy, and a lot of people don't see that. But that, what it shows is it shows that appearances don't necessarily matter. And once you get past the moat of uh, appearance, there's more to a person. And
Mhm.
I think that's what the film tries to tell, the environment, the universe tries to tell Edward that, it's not about the face you carry that defines you. But even though he gets this miraculous opportunity to reinvent himself, he still, I think the film ends in a line where he goes to prison and there's another time jump and
Yep.
they're a lot older and they're having dinner. They're still friends, surprisingly. Turns out they're married and they want to, like, Ingrid and Oswald want to move to some cult,
Canada.
nudist
Nudist cult.
colony somewhere in Canada.
Yep.
And they're talking about like the daughter who's going to grad school and how things have changed. And that's where she makes that joke. The play was a piece of shit.
Yep.
And that's where it ends with uh Guy being lost confused, can't make up his own decision because they can't, they're ordering food. Oswald's like pretty quick with his order, but guy's lost in his own thoughts. That's where the camera has a close up on Sebastian Stan's face, and you can hear Oswald off camera saying, "Oh, my friend, you've not changed at all." And I think for some people, they find it too on the nose, the ending. Did you necessarily think that way? For me,
Eh,
it was all right to an extent.
eh.
I didn't have too much of a problem with it.
I was meh. I'm just happy he didn't kill himself. And also a PSA: if you ever have bad thoughts, anybody that ever listens to this, don't do it.
No, but I want to bring out one piece of detail in that encounter, which kind of blew my mind in a way. So when they're talking, he calls Guy Edward. I don't know if you noticed this,
Oh,
but he
I
act
did. I think he was referring to him as the character.
no, but that's where it's ambiguous because it's
Right.
like, is he referring to himself as a character, or is it that they know that he's Edward? Because obviously, if he had to go to prison and get
They
incarcerated for
right. They'd have his real
manslaughter,
name.
they would have got his fingerprints and figured
Right.
out his identity. It would have been a big
Ah,
thing in the local
you
news.
already have to
Yeah.
be in the criminal justice system for you to be able to match his fingerprints.
Well, I think yeah, it's a bit ambiguous, but I,
Yeah,
I like that bit of detail that he referred him to
as Edward.
as Edward, and
Mm,
I think it's one of those tiny moments that can fly past if you don't pay attention.
okay.
But overall, like I thought that I was expecting like a more crazier ending, like something more violent.
Yeah,
I'm
me
actually
too.
glad it didn't. It didn't. What did you think of like before we wrap this up? What do you think of all the training videos in the film? Because
Oh, like that where you're talking about people that are disfigured?
yeah,
Or yeah, yeah, oh, like I was saying earlier, it physically made me ill. Like I did not like that at all. I liked that it
the
was in the
the
movie. I
the,
just
the video or the way they
the
shot it.
training video, the way it was shot, it was just making me feel uncomfortable.
Yeah,
It was doing what it needed to do.
yeah, it was.
Yeah, I liked it. It did make me think, what the fuck am I watching? Did a part of the narrative? I was confused for a second, and then I got it.
Yeah, yeah, it was. I like the detail. I like that it played with the idea of like an infomercial because I feel like personally, I've done some. I worked at a workplace that make you go through a lot
Oh
of
yeah,
different like training, and you gotta you always the films that they show you are so fucking cringe and shitty.
yeah.
They make you
The
wanna.
sexual harassment. That's the one I always remember. Every job I've ever had, they made me watch that, and I'm like, well, I'm not. Obviously, I'm not gonna try to SA a coworker at work.
I mean, it's like that, and then there's like the ones on racism and like
Right.
microaggression,
You could make all of
disability.
those like 30 seconds, and it could just be a guy going, "Don't be a dick. Treat people how you want to be treated." That's all they really have to say, and that could cover
That's
everything.
true. That is so true. Just don't be a dick.
Yeah,
And everyone's different. We're all different. We've all got our own insecurities, but just don't be a dick, I guess.
pretty easy.
So I wanna shout out to the score. I love the sort of jazz like
Hmm.
score composed in this film. I think it does a lot of work. Technically, I love the like I said, I enjoyed that it was shot on film, and apparently, they were not sure they could even shoot it in New York. Uh,
Yep.
and
Filmed
then
during
and
COVID, knocked down in 22 days.
that's what's incredible about it. And I think that Aaron Schimberg spoke a lot about Sebastian Stan being a major, force in this film for it to exist because he kind of, him joining the film. allowed it to be financed and got it the sort of push it needed to be made. And like you said, they shot it in 22 days, which is crazy.
Yep.
Uh, that's an insane achievement to shoot a film in
Mhm.
22 days is not
Mhm.
easy. I've spent, I have experience spending 3 months just trying to shoot a short film, and you can get lost in the intricacies and the complexities of everything: scheduling, story, craft, performance. I mean, I can't imagine what sort of a chaotic endeavor it must have been to get this done, because the scene where Edward walks through under the subway and you hear the screeching of the subway and this loud siren noise playing, that was the
Yep.
very first thing they shot. And that sense of chaos, I think they really just embraced it and they took it. And there's all these other moments that are so personal. This is where I think the direction stands out for me. The ceiling falling off and hitting his wall, like hitting his face.
Yep. I
That
even
bit
yelled "ouch" when that happened.
thing is like that really comes across as like a blunt metaphor, but the thing is that actually happened to Schimberg. So that was actually based on his real experience of living in New York. He had like a ceiling that was kind of falling over.
Oh,
Luckily, I don't think it
gross.
fell on his face, but it was drawn from his own personal experience. And I think this is where a lot of the reflection, the paranoia of how people with facial difference are viewed. Uh, he captures all those things in a way that makes it really palatable, and it's not just watching something really miserable and bleak. And it's his ability to draw certain sense of humor and drama from interplay, and you know all these. I think I just love the depiction of New York in this film. I think it's fucking crazy. It
Yep.
feels
I
like
hate
it's
New
a
York.
fever dream.
Fuck New York.
Oh no, I think it's the greatest city in the world. It really is. You
That was the
can't
most
walk.
American thing you've ever said.
No, no, it's true. I mean, you can't walk 100 steps in New York and not come across 100 different characters.
Oh,
That's
I thought
how
you were gonna say without
fucking.
stepping in rat shit.
There's rat shit everywhere in the world, my friend. That's you
New
can't
York, they live in the sewers. They live in the subway tunnels.
everywhere. But let's wrap this up.
Hell yeah.
Want to go to the final thoughts and want to give it a rating?
Sure. You want me to go?
Yeah.
All right. So while watching this film, I had a lot of thoughts. A Different Man has some great performances. Sebastian Shaw, um,
Stan. Sebastian Stan.
Stan. Oh, whatever. Uh, um, the guy that does Winter Soldier, he did great. The guy that played the other role in the director's other movie, he did great. Pearson. I think, I still think it was a misstep to make him handsome. We talked about this earlier, but I still think I liked him better when I could sympathize with him. Cannot sympathize with beautiful
But that's the
guy.
point, right?
I know that is the point, but still, that's how I felt. If Edward and Oswald met each other, being of different face, maybe that would be an interesting line to go down. I'm not sure. There's a reason why I don't write scripts. Um, Honestly, the second half of the movie wasn't as compelling for me as the first half. But I will still, give it a decent rating for what it is. I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. My detractions are just really I wasn't as interested in the story after the second half. But in other news, the substance, in comparison for me, is now being bumped up to a 9 out of 10.
I gave the substance a 9 out of 10. By
You
the way,
did,
so
and I think you're right. I think you're right.
I was ahead of the curve.
You were see.
I'm
I'll
gonna
be ahead of the
gloat and
curve in
take the credit there.
Redline. You'll be the head of the curve in the substance, and that's fine by me.
Yeah. And then we can tally it up down the line.
Oh my
No,
god.
I agree with your assertions. I think look, the film this is a film that changes drastically midway and it becomes a different film in the second half of it. But for me, I think it didn't bother me as much as it did with you, and I completely understand your point of view. I do think, it sets up a character that's really tragic and earnest and suffering, and then it completely shits on it. And it just shows what a cruel joke it is of, it's a cruel joke of getting what you want. And sometimes the things you want aren't necessarily the things that's best for you. You got to be careful of what you wish for. And I think the performances are amazing for sure. It really is Sebastian Stan for me who I think stands out the most. Although I really love the juxtaposition between his character and Adam Pearson, and I think the tension between a character who is playing a disabled character with prosthetics and then meets a character who's actually disfigured in a way. I think the tension of that interplay really creates something unique, and it's as unique as watching real actors perform with non-professional actors, street casting. It creates this sort of crazy dynamic which you really can't find in a script. So, that's realism in a way that comes out of it. So I really enjoyed the way this screenplay was nuanced. I think the substance, I don't want to compare it too much with it, but it does work as an unlikely companion piece. I think this film has more nuance on a screenplay level than the substance, but it's not as entertaining as the substance. The substance is like the most I've ever laughed this year watching a film. So this is a very different film. It's dark, it's psychological, it's unsettling, and it's littered with moments of humor and cruel, ironic jokes that actually just show like a character's progression in a really perverse way. Uh, I want to like technically I've already said I love the score, I love the prosthetic work, I love the fact that they shot it on film. It captures New York and the crazy energy of New York, the sense of paranoia and anxiety. And overall, I wish like perhaps like it would have been better if it didn't take too long for the first half of the film to get to the midway point. But I think like it would have been nicer to see more of Adam Pearson. I wish he was more in it more. But overall, I'm still gonna give it an 8 out of 10. I think it definitely makes my top 10 list this year, along with the substance. I think it's criminally underlooked. People can have an opinion on it. They can hate it, they can love it. That's fine. But I do think it deserves to be seen and talked about. And I hope more people give this a chance. It's available on demand. You can stream it, buy it, rent it, whatever. And I just fucking hope A24 gets their shit together and really markets each of their films more earnestly and gives them a fighting chance to be seen. It's I just wish it wasn't so obscured away in like the slate of films that are coming out rapidly. So yeah, that's just my final opinion on it.
Mhm.
Keep an eye out for Aaron Schimberg. He's like I said, he's kind of made films that are really personal on this subject matter, and I think what he does with A Different Man is something unique. A lot of filmmakers wouldn't necessarily get that right, and that comes down to personal experience. So, just want to again give that shout out as well. But on that note, that is my final review of A Different Man.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely want to watch Schimberg's other film that has Pearson in it. Just interesting to see how that goes. Um, Definitely intrigued. So are
Adam
you?
Pearson as well.
Yep.
He's is actually really underlooked. I think Yeah, I remember him from Under the Skin, which is
Yep.
a film by Jonathan Glazer, whose film we reviewed, Sexy Beast, earlier in the year in the summer. Um,
Oh,
he had a small part in that film, which is great. And yeah, I hope we get to see more of Adam Pearson.
see,
I just think he's a really good actor.
I agree. Ready to go on the wreck?
Yep.
All right.
Well, we've been recommending this for weeks now, but
Right, because we've been
I
waiting
guess
for
we
it to
can finally.
freaking come out.
I'm not gonna read the synopsis,
Oh
but
no, I wouldn't even. Don't even bother.
Arcane.
We talked about that earlier, how we were going to cover Arcane, and it comes out in a couple of days. The rest of the thing's going to drop. We're going to watch it all. We'll very soon we will do a review on that on Arcane season 2. And if you don't want to be spoiled for Arcane season 2, go check it out. If you don't want to be spoiled for really anything, you should probably watch it before even clicking one of our videos or on Spotify.
See you for that episode.
Yep. See you, Space Cowboy.